Not you?
Yeah, this is great.
Kevin, Andy, W4. Can you take that back for us? Thank you.
You guys can't leave without signing. You have to sign your life away before you leave.
Are there ones that already signed?
So we can get it real quick.
I went to the SAU office.
There's a new one.
Two ones to have. Oh, great, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'll call the meeting to order. First up is the public hearing on video and audio recording in school classrooms. This is basically a formality that we have to go through every year to allow video recording in classrooms, so it is a public hearing for that. So if anyone does have questions or comments about that, I'm happy to listen to them now.
Here's the
You guys all,
You want to read that?
yeah, I'll read it. Try to read it.
You need some readers?
I do. Forgot them at
You
all.
want me to hold it over here?
The board recognizes that video and/or audio recordings can serve many valuable purposes that align with our school's educational mission and program. Video and audio recording is used in schools to record performances, support instruction, create classroom instruction, document student achievement, and provide tools for educator professional development. As of August 1st, 2015, each school district must hold an annual public hearing regarding this practice. If a teacher intends to video and audio record one or more students, written consent must be obtained from the parent or legal guardian of each student who will be recorded. If a student or school official with a legitimate educational interest wishes to audio or video record a teacher or student in a classroom, written consent must be obtained from the teacher who will be recorded and the parent legal guardian of each student who will be recorded. Written consent is not required for video and/or audio recordings made pursuant to an IEP or 504 plan, school recordings of any class, performance, competition, ceremony, instruction, presentation, orientation, training, assembly, or any other school-sponsored event that occurs outside the physical confines of the classroom. School recordings of school grounds and facilities for security or other purposes. Recording on buses is authorized by the school board pursuant to RSA 570-A:2. Recordings made in compliance with the district's FERPA annual notice. Questions, comments? I'll close the public hearing on video and audio recording. Next up is to approve the minutes from June 19th. Entertain a motion to do so. So moved.
Second.
Any changes, comments, questions? Hearing none. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Brings us to citizen comments. I'll open the floor to any questions or comments anyone has at this point. Hearing none, we'll move right on to presentation of school programs.
We'll do that under administrator's reports.
Sure. Go right into old business, preschool, next steps.
No new news on that. I think the September meeting is when I plan on having something prepared.
Do you think that will be a full, do you think you'll have everything you'll need to give to us by then?
I think so. We're just waiting for the church committee to weigh in with their recommendation, and we'll be all set to go.
Okay. Do we want to do anything with this, under this?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
Board members or business affairs.
I can just,
Emily?
one thing related to that, I've been in touch with Deanna Glazer. She's on vacation right now, but we're going to be scheduling a time that's conducive to young families for the Bedrock presentation, Spark, New Hampshire. So hopefully she'll contact folks and we'll see what happens with that. So whether that happens at the library, the church, or here, whatever makes sense. So.
Peter?
Thanks, Jerry. I can't even remember, June seems so long ago. But I'll only reiterate, assuming that the church will be in favor of this, which some of us are advocating pretty strongly for. I would hope, that after the September meeting, when we have some of the details kind of hashed out and a little bit further along, that we can start to see some real affirmative push if everything works out the way it should, or you all feel it should, that the board will see it fit to really start advocating for this, for the preschool, because I think people are wondering and waiting, and I think, again, as I mentioned, I think at the June meeting, thinking about a little bit of proactive leadership on the part of the board. If you all are for this, which I hope you are, that will mean a lot to the community. There's, as I said earlier, there's a difference between looking at it and studying it and really being an advocate for it. I think this is not only a good thing, I think it's critical for the long-term health of this town and of this school. You can look at it as you want, AAA ball club, feeder program into the school, but it's critical for families to be able to, as a portion of these, some families to be able to live and stay and raise their families in Jackson. So I hope you'll consider that.
The only thing that I asked also in addition, just to put it out there, I'm not expecting an answer right now, is that in addition to the church information, and I know in tandem to come back, the town wanted to know if we had sought any alternative funding ideas. So I put that back out there so that, to your point, Peter, is that when we get an answer from the church, if it is a yes, then
Am
we
I on the
also
clock now,
have...
Jen? Am I on the clock? Is that what you're saying? No, okay.
But I'm saying that in addition to getting hopefully the yes from the church, that we also have some answers if we have any ideas on the alternative funding, so that we can move forward faster, as opposed to saying, okay, now we take another month to figure, something out.
Sure.
So that was my pushback and takeaway from that listening post.
Just so I understand, is when you're saying that, Jen, is that something that the school board is coming up with alternative? Who does that?
It's the school, the preschool committee.
Oh, got it, the committee, okay,
Yeah,
cool.
and that was some feedback that was taken
Yep.
in, and I just wanted to make, to vet it.
Got it.
To see what we have, so.
But just to clarify, so when the preschool committee presented the plan last fall,
Yep.
that was a concern that was raised, because there was a feeling that, they wanted us to look at novel approaches to getting money. We are hemmed in as a school board about where we can take money from and how we can take money. But I think we all, from the beginning, have thought, however we do it, let's try to be creative and think outside the box. So I think what John's saying is we're throwing it out to the community. If someone has an idea that is not reflective of what we've already said or done, we would love to hear it. And I know, Micah, you've been very proactive about that, so I'm grateful for that as the head of the committee. But what you should know is there's no preschool committee at this time. That committee finished its work. Gail is in charge of this project at this time. So we will make a decision about where that will go from there, but there's no committee right now to do that.
Okay.
So, just to clarify that.
2 questions. The first is just a logistical one. June felt like a long time ago to me too. I was just looking at notes that I wrote down. Is there something that shifted with the church? Because I had written a note that the church committee was meeting the day after your last school board meeting, and that the decision would be rendered at that time. So I'm just curious if that didn't happen, or they
I
postponed the
can't really
meeting.
speak to that. I know I have been in touch and an email to the
And they
pastor
didn't
just
give you a
recently,
decision.
and I haven't gotten a response yet, so I'm not quite sure. whether
Yeah, and
they
I can
decided.
just confirm that was, I just touched base with Gail over the summer, same thing, what's up, and from talking with the church, they were still waiting for details on utilities, what would those additional expenses be. In terms of looking for creative funding, I think part of my feeling is, if we're looking at a publicly supported preschool, it's a publicly supported preschool. And if we start looking at additional funding from additional outside organizations, it's starting to sound a lot like what was here in Jackson 8 years ago, Middle Christian School, a nonprofit. And so that's where, I guess, when different school districts are looking at trying to bring in these programs, it's on the taxpayers, and as much as you can get creative, if we start always looking to outside funding sources, which we do for a ton of social services, it'd be really great if we could show that model that our community truly supports this, and maybe it's not a full day thing, maybe it's half day, you sort of see it, all those things you all have studied, but that would be an important component.
That raises a pretty important point, which is we're the school board who represents the school district, the
Right.
taxpayers of the town.
Yeah.
It's really, I think, important to have separation from that. we're not going to be opposed to people who donate money to the school, as far as outside sources are concerned. I think that the only thing that the school board can look at as far as being creative, as far as funding is concerned, is what kind of grant money is available for this kind of endeavor.
Yeah.
And that happens within the envelope of the school budget and within, the taxpayers' base. But I think that as a school board, and it is a publicly funded preschool that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So I think that your point's pretty important. We do need to be
Yeah.
pretty clear about that. Is that, we're talking about raising town funds to do this as a public entity.
Right. And that's not to negate certainly those grant fundings that are coming, grant funding possibilities that are coming through, educational grants. I mean, Gail and I were talking a little bit about that, Every Student Supports Act, there's a lot of different of those. I'm just a little nervous about, we start going to a lot of the wonderful, generous foundations and organizations around. Ooh, that could be a little bit of a slippery slope. That's my personal opinion, so.
No, and I think what you're hearing though from us is that was never the intention of the preschool committee. We never looked to fund it privately necessarily or with grant money.
Yeah.
In that vein.
Yeah.
More what you're hearing is that that was a criticism that was levied at the preschool committee, that we weren't making enough. And so
Right.
that's our way of turning it back and saying, we would love this to be paid for
Yeah.
without taxpayer money.
Yeah.
But we, as a board, we have to look and say, we're willing to commit to this because we think it's the right thing to do, if that's
Yeah.
what we go forward with. But of course, if someone wants to send some money this way to alleviate those costs for taxpayers, we're not going to turn that away, and we would love to hear from it. Because certainly, we tried to turn over every stone,
Yeah.
but we're not perfect. So, and we
Oh, no, and,
so
you
we'd
know-
love to hear from people if there's another way of doing it.
Yeah, and that's
we didn't
it.
come up with one.
Yeah.
But we are happy to hear if there is one.
Okay.
But, and Peter, to your point, I think that it's going to be important for the school board at some point. I don't know whether it's going to be able to happen in September. Preferably, it would happen after a public hearing. We may need to make a decision as to whether we're going to do it or not.
Right.
And it's not really whether we're behind it or for it or not, because, I think that we're all in favor of the concept. It doesn't become real until we as a board decide to actually do it through a majority vote. And that's pending basically the details of the information at this point. And but I think it's important, like you said, for us to really make that decision. That's like, we're either going to do it or we're going to postpone it for the future. And I think when we're ready to make that decision, we need to be clear about that, and we need to make a majority vote. Okay, we're going to pursue this and go from there.
There have been very few times in my experience with the school board is that if the school board makes a decision that we want to go ahead with this, the taxpayers of Jackson have supported 95% of the things that, that I've had experience with. So, yep, grant money would be great and it's helpful with various parts of a program, but if the taxpayers approve it, then we're good. We wouldn't need alternative funding.
I'm just speaking with, the community came and they spoke and they said, is there any other way you can look at alternative funding, at least maybe for the first year, startup costs, those types of things. So I'm putting it back out there that we listened to the community, we've heard them, this is what they're looking for, so we're trying to vet if there is any other sources. I'm not looking probably for ongoing funding, but maybe startup funding or any ideas that are out there. This is not my arena of funding preschool or education ideas, so I'm putting it out to the community. If somebody hasn't heard what the listening post had said, putting it back out there to a new audience per se that may have some ideas. That's all.
And to touch on what Jerry said about the public hearing, and kind of based on what you have said too, Peter, it's hard too I'm having a very hard time with this as a school board member, because I'm all for preschool. I think it's great. Timing is a different issue, and when's the right time. And we have plenty of people that show up to all these meetings that are all for it, and it's great. Everybody's doing all this work. They really want to see it happen. So far, we've had one meeting that counts, when we had a hearing on this once, and it was divided. My opinion, it was divided too. So as a school board member, we need to take those things into consideration too. So I think the community itself maybe needs to be more educated on what's going on, instead of those people who maybe were against it not having all the facts, and maybe that's why they're against it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Keith. I have to say I was really shocked at that meeting, the one public meeting we had. Not that people had concerns I understand and questions, but just a visceral no was kind of shocking to me, living in this town where, especially on the school side, Andy, I get your point. We don't say no outright very often, that they weren't open to the concept. And that, to me, was kind of a red flag saying, we've got some work to do as a community and maybe as the board to get out in front of this and be proactive and be positive about it. Again, the devil's in the details. I understand all that. And I'm more than happy to talk to you on the clock about creative funding solutions. It's what I do. And to help you look at some ideas about, how you can get some money, not a lot of money, or to help you get started. But again, I think the key here is this is a public concept that we're talking about, and it is just that. It's a community coming together and funding it publicly, like we would fund Social Security or anything else on the front end or the back end. So it'll be really interesting to hear, to see what the devil. I would maybe schedule some more time at the September meeting, because I have a feeling it might be it'd be a topic of big discussion, because if it's going to happen for 2018, 2019, the clock, you guys know, the clock is running, and you got to kind of have the numbers in by December, to have the meeting in February, to have the public meeting in March. So that's, we're all under the same time frame.
In that regard, I think that if we can get as much of the details in place by September, it'd be great. And I think, Gail, maybe if you'd like, at this point, you and I can talk and see how we can get as much of the details as we can complete by our September meeting, and get the information to the school board so that we can probably in our September meeting schedule talk about the details a little bit, to get the details out into the public, so that we can have a public hearing shortly thereafter. And then after the public hearing, the board can get together and make a decision, I think, one way or the other, as far as what we're going to do.
We have the school costs, the custodial materials and all of those. We're waiting on the rent, which I think was contingent upon them figuring out percentage of electric bill and plowing and that kind of.
Insurance, and we talked a little.
Yeah, we've got that. We've got those figures as well. So we were just kind of waiting for the tuition rate and the yes from the church. Really.
And then I'm assuming at some point we need to have the building inspected to make sure it meets the public school standards.
Jay Henry's been through it already and taken a look at the building and the sprinkler systems, and we've already covered that as well. There will be some additional costs that I have to add to the budget piece because of the need of the church to use that room, packing it up and putting it away and those kinds of things. So I've kind of done everything that I can do at this point until we get the rent cost and the yes from the church.
So just for clarity's sake, to kind of bring it all together, at this point, we still are considering the plan that was put forward last fall with those missing pieces from the church.
Right.
You have confirmation that the church will be getting back with you by September, is that right? Or
I've notified them that that's when I need to
Okay.
do my presentation, yes.
Okay, and to your, at this time, have they gone back to say, yeah, we think we can have that by then? Or is it sort of still out there hanging?
I haven't gotten the response yet. To my email.
So maybe you could follow up with them to pin them down on that, because we do need to know that. I mean, having gone through this just a year ago, we know that there's the September and October, and we, as a board,
And we're
make
doing the
budget
budget,
decisions,
right.
Public hearings and things like that. And then, we don't have a formal committee. You offered to help. Obviously, I think any one of us would help. I'd be happy to jump back in if you need something, but maybe you can talk to Peter on the clock to see if there is anything else, because that's a question I think we do have to answer to taxpayers. And I think all of us would stand up willingly and say, we are willing to commit taxpayer dollars to this if this is the plan we're behind. But I think we also need to be able to say, okay, but also there is nothing else that we need to run down as far as funding goes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the funding piece, I think, is, to me, fundamentally, we have the obligation to represent the taxpayers.
Right.
And this is how much it's going to cost, and we have to be under the assumption that it's going to be fully funded by the taxpayers. As far as additional resources for income is concerned, you always have the ability to look for whatever our endeavors
Oh, no,
are.
of course, yes.
And that's a different kind of fundamental budgeting aspect of how a school board operates. It's like, we've never taken the idea of, okay, we're going to aggressively go after all the grants we possibly can. So I don't think that we'd be looking, to me, it would be foolish to do that on one endeavor that the school will be undertaking. If we're going to be after grant funding to lower the tax rate, we should do that from a comprehensive standpoint of everything that we did, not just the preschool, because we shouldn't hang the preschool on, well, we do it, but it costs a lot, so we can't get the grant funding for it, so therefore we're not going to do it. I think that that's not a strategy for success. I think as a school board, if we decide, if the majority of the school board decides we're going to do the preschool and it costs X, we have to be under the assumption that that's what it's going to cost the taxpayers to do
Oh,
it.
and we have to be able to commit to that as a
Right.
board, which I'm 100% with. I'm just saying, if you have a member of the audience who happens to be an expert in this, and he's offered
Not an
time,
expert.
why not?
Just an opinion.
No, there's no my opinion here, but, you know, if we have someone who's willing to talk with us.
But I mean, I think, like, as Jen said, it's important to acknowledge that, yes,
Yeah.
we're not opposed to the idea of
Right.
doing that, but that's not really what our responsibilities are as a whole, I think, fundamentally. And I think that the more information, we're not going to be able to make a solid decision until we have all the information in place. And I think Gail's getting close to that. I think that we don't need a committee necessarily to do that. I understand that I'll review with Gail as far as what we might need to get all the details in place for September so that we can discuss them, have a public hearing where we get feedback from the community. And then I think we need to make a decision as to whether we're going to do it or not. Thank you.
Just to kind of roll that ball forward, Jerry, what does timing look like? So September, we get the information, we think about a public hearing happens, what, 3 weeks after that, a month after that? Like, what does the layout look like that, and then a school board decision? I understand the March, you know, like the vote, I'm just trying to understand what happens this fall.
The public hearing part of it is something we've always struggled with. When's the best time to do it? Because is it at 5 o'clock, is it
Yeah.
at 7 o'clock, is it on a Thursday?
Yeah.
We get into the fall sports with people, and it's everyone's schedules are always hectic. We always think that, well, there's always a time of year when schedules aren't, so what we'll probably do is plan it sooner than later and just do it.
Yeah.
And then we get the people that show up, we get the people that show up,
Yeah.
and go from there. And it's, you know, we also need, we hear from people that don't just come from public hearings. It's, you know, they'll call us and tell us what they think.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, people will do that individually more than they'll actually come to a public hearing anyway. So we'll get the information that we need to make a decision, I think, as far as where the pulse of the community is. I think the pulse of the community is supportive of it once the details are ironed out. They don't think that we did the homework on the details last year, and that's the one piece I'd like to get in place. When we get the details in place, then it's time for the school board to make a decision, because we couldn't even make a rational decision last year with the
Yeah.
details that we had.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the key point that really needs to be made, is that when people come to say, well, if you consider other alternative funding sources, yes, budget law in New Hampshire is, our responsibilities are to raise the funds through the taxpayers. That's what we have the ability to do. Everything else is outside of our prerogative, so that's the answer to that, but we weren't really confidently stating that last year, so I think it's, but the process will probably look like, if we can get as many details as we can, as soon as we have, comfortable with the details, discuss them publicly, then we'll get the public hearing scheduled, hopefully sooner rather than later, because as Peter said, the latest we can have the budget numbers in place is December, but it's nice to have them out in the community way before then so that we know what the reaction's going to be. So hopefully by early October, we'll have a public hearing.
And I think, you know, as an addendum to that, because this has been on a topic of conversation for however many, 18 months or something, or longer in Jackson, people know about it, and the community is like, so what's happening with it? And I think it's a really fortunate moment in time to then have action this fall, one way or the other, for the school board to say, this is where we stand with it. Because people, you know, I mean, I know a lot of other families who aren't here tonight, you know, we've been talking to a bunch of people like, okay, start coming to school board meetings, and as everybody knows, it's really hard to do when you have young kids who might be in preschool, or anyone to pull off. But, you know, people are curious, and they're excited about it, and I think that it's great to be able to then share with the community what's happening, that, you know, things are responsive, and then try to help get people out to that public comment period. If nothing else, and I understand people can also call you and write you, I think that for people to feel what the community wants, I think that's going to be really important based on the meeting that we had last year, right? I think that making sure that people on all sides are there and being represented.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Great. Pavilion update. Any news there? You following along?
Nope, no news there either.
Keep seeing stuff pile up back there.
There were materials that have been hiding off somewhere on there. This is true. There are materials out there, but we haven't come together as a team to discuss the timeline and put all of that into place. Okay. Yeah.
Any instructional issues? Not much going on in the classroom right now.
We've been busy professional developing, and so we're going to talk about that a little later.
Consider a motion to elect Jen Heisler as the lead soccer coach. Someone? Any questions? Discussion? All those in favor?
Who's the second on that?
Keith.
Kate.
I should adapt. Do you have coaches already? Do we know?
No, she's working on that, she's just started working on that.
7B and 7C that I handed out, those are election of your PE teacher and world language teacher.
Thanks, everyone.
Everybody, sorry to do like the preschool job.
Just follow me.
You guys got all the kids in the car.
Oh, this one's, forget it. So consider election of, again, motion to consider the election of Pablo Casabuenas as part-time 20% physical education teacher.
Rolling in. Second.
Second, discussion.
Good.
Good.
It's fabulous.
All those in favor? It's unanimous. The names again. Entertain a motion to consider the election of Pablo Casabuenas as world language tutor.
Motion. He's the physics teacher.
That was moved and seconded?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think it's awesome that you got the same person for both these positions.
Yeah.
That is
Back
fabulous.
in June, I was kidding with someone, I said, I'm gonna find me a Spanish-speaking PE teacher, and boy, I was.
Just, yeah,
You're gonna like him,
it's great.
he's very energetic, plays guitar as well, if you need
Salsa dancing as well, when I started doing the salsa dancing.
So what does this make it, like a 40% position or something?
Well, the two different ones,
No.
a stipend and hourly fees, yes.
So yes, he'll be here more often,
Yeah.
which would be good.
Right, that's always a
fantastic, yeah.
benefit, to have somebody hear more
And
hours.
bringing the guitar back to the building.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. I say we have a Mersham gym.
You just made it.
I think that's awesome. You okay?
All those in favor? That's unanimous.
You can put it up there.
Business cards, budget status report, any questions? Gonna be a whole lot of questions. Budget. The summary expenses and receipts, questions there?
Just to point out on page 2, the Whitney Center reimbursement, that $10,000 check, that was for the siding, remember that went back, and that's why that line is at $13,194.
So we have till June to spend it, basically.
No, that went back.
Oh, that went
That
back?
went back, correct.
Because we didn't spend it.
Right.
But we didn't need to.
Went into the unreserved fund balance.
Right, right.
So we don't need to replace the siding?
You will.
Yeah, so we just.
We're gonna talk a
back
little bit
again.
about that.
Yeah.
Moving forward.
Saving all the good stuff. Okay.
Well,
Any questions about the school lunch program summary?
Seems like it was, what, 6,000 last year?
no, actually.
What was it last year?
You folks have been consistent at about $9,000 for the past 4 years. 9,100, 9,200, 9,000, 9,300, so very consistent for the past 4 years.
And we entertain a motion to retain the fund balance from June 30th. I guess before we make a motion, because the motion would probably have to contain a dollar amount to make sense out of it. Let's just start discussion on it anyway, I guess.
Do we have a dollar amount?
There is. It's based upon a percentage on 8D. You're allowed to retain up to $55,163.
This year.
What was our unreserved fund balance?
It was 117.
It was 117.
117. So there are a couple of different ways to take a look at that. And
As I said, if you are anticipating doing something with the siding, it might not be a bad idea to retain this money, even though it's going to offset for the following year.
So we'd use the rest of the taxes for the following year, so I mean, I guess that would come into play as, I guess there's no reason not to retain at least that 10,000 at this point.
We have none right now?
Usually you
We can-
do not,
Yeah.
well, you haven't
We just
typically
gave it back.
retained those in the past few years. But if you wanted to, you could.
And would you remind me, what are the uses, what the restrictions on how that money is spent?
It would have to be for an emergency type situation.
Has to be an emergency. type
Well,
situation.
the other use, Keith, is to have future tax rate spikes as well.
Right.
So like you
Like giving it back the following year?
giving it back the following year instead of this year like we did.
Yeah.
So that's the way you would creatively retain that $10,000 if you were going to do the siding in the 1918 school year. There's other ways that we can do that too, through communicating with the selectmen. If we wanted to do that this year, it depends what we have in reserve for.
I have those numbers.
Funds.
So you have in the Whitney Trust Fund, $39,300. And in the Maintenance Trust Fund, you have $76,000 as well. So you could return everything if you intended on taking it from those accounts, or you could retain a certain amount so that, that's the biggest thing. You want to try and control your tax rate from jumping up and down.
I mean, are we talking a $10,000 expense, or just 10,000 is all we got out of the insurance?
No, we're getting another check probably for about the same, I think. Might be 11, I think, the next one.
And that'll be in this school year, we'll get that one coming up?
You never know when you'll
It's a
get it.
settlement.
We got an email today that said 2020.
I wouldn't bank on that right now.
2020, and do we know how much it's gonna cost us to do it all?
So that's the, really what it comes down to is when do we plan on doing the siding change?
Are we obligated to do anything?
Yeah.
Based on,
Falling off.
based on, well, I mean, based on accepting the
Right now,
funds?
John is repairing them as they come off, he's re-gluing them back on.
So we're not, if we accept the funds?
But Keith, to clarify what you're talking about, that ship sailed. So the money is in the unreserved fund balance currently. So the money that we got for the siding is
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah, yeah. I
So
know.
that's irrelevant.
Yes, I know that, but I'm just saying, because we accepted the insurance claim or whatever, are we expected to do the repairs?
Oh, no,
No.
No, we don't have to give the money back because we didn't do the repair.
no, right. So that's, that's a check that you get that you can, I mean, in theory, it's for the siding, but it's, they look at it from the standpoint of funds are fungible.
Yeah.
That, regardless of what our budget law is, so I mean, that's, it's irrelevant to them. We have the money in our, basically the way I would look at it is it really depends when we want to replace the siding. We have enough money in our maintenance fund to do it pretty much probably anytime we need to.
Yeah.
We're covered there as far as, well, if it has to be done next month, we can do it next month. If we can ride out the year, it really depends, we can look at it separately. If we've got the time to look at the two issues separately, how it gets paid for, we've got the money to pay for it now. If we retain that $10,000 in the fund, then next year, if we're gonna do it in the 18-19 school year, and we were, keep it in the, the retaining fund balance, if we keep it in there, then the 18-19 school year, we can release it back to the tax rate to reduce the tax rate then. Is probably the most transparent way to spend that money at this point. Otherwise, it goes into the unreserved fund balance, goes back to the selectmen, and I can go to the selectmen and say, hey, don't spend $10,000 of that unreserved fund balance this October to lower the town's tax rate, because we want to retain that for the.
So you think we
this
should
year.
retain the 10 that we already lost? That's why you think we should retain 10? Because that 10 already went back.
What I'm saying is that if we want to use that $10,000 to pay for siding, the most transparent way to do that at this point is to retain it in the fund balance, and then when we're here next year, we give it back. And then it reduces, then it has to be used to reduce the tax rate.
So we'll give the 107 back and keep 10, is that what you said?
Right.
Because otherwise, it's really, it's, that $10,000 that we got for the thing does reduce the tax rate now.
Yeah. But then we gotta ask for it back.
But then we gotta ask for it back
Right.
through the return, so it's just,
Yeah.
it's more convoluted. I think that, what I would recommend at the very least is that we retain the money that we got from there, in that fund balance, because that's the most transparent way to retain it.
And then if we don't, we have to spend that by this time next year, or we give it back again? No. It
No, we
stays there
don't, we
forever.
purposely don't spend it.
It stays there.
Well, we
forever.
can't, because the only reason why if we came to an emergency situation where we had to spend it, yeah, we'd spend it.
Yeah.
That's a different situation. But the only way we could spend it is if there's an emergency that we get approval from the state school board, or the Department of Education to spend it for an emergency. That's a different scenario. But the idea that we'd be keeping it is so that we can reduce the tax rate with it for the 18-19 school year. If we were going to do it then, it might not be till 2020 when we decide to do
Well,
it.
if it's costing us $1,000 a year to put them back up there, it might be even longer, you know?
Right, what I'm saying is that-
Now, right?
I know that Jim Hill directed John Stokey, when we found out that we weren't getting that money back right away,
Yeah.
to figure out the best plan of attack on the siding and the building over there. And that just went out today. So
Yeah.
Good, okay.
Yeah, I'm good with retaining it.
Well, yeah, when the siding needs to be done, you know, Gail and John have been in discussion about it, they're on top of it, John
Yeah.
talks to me about it, so it's being monitored right now, basically, is the situation.
It's not a pressing issue.
It's not costing us
Yeah.
a lot of money
Yeah,
at this point
that's what I'm
to
saying.
keep it the way it is, but at some point it might start costing us money.
just one more piece of information.
Time and labor.
When the budget was developed, it was anticipated that there would be $35,000 of unanticipated, or fund balance at the end of the year. So that's usually a very conservative estimate for
Yeah.
projecting out tax rates and whatnot. And you did have a little bit more
Quite a bit more.
savings, yeah.
So,
Do you want to throw a number out there?
Let's go 25 then.
that's
That's a big number back.
I think the 25 is
Yeah.
probably a smart number to use, because it puts a little bit of padding into our emergency situations that might occur. Does that make sense to people?
Are you gonna vote
So
first?
I'd entertain a motion to retain $25,000 from the fund balance from fiscal year, last fiscal year,
16, 17.
that ended on June 30th.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? It's unanimous.
Good job.
Cool. We gotta sign some forms. Do we all need to sign forms? Is that,
You have the manifest that needs to be signed, but the MS-25, for those of you who don't remember, these are the official line items that have to be formatted for the Department of Revenue Administration. So essentially, you're just, and every board member has to sign this.
so why don't we,
Start it off, Keith.
want to plow through the rest of the meeting first and then sign it at the
Sign it at the
end?
end.
Because we need the manifest and a couple others.
So when we get through everything else, that way people don't need to sit around watching it. There's only
The-
3 of you now, I suppose. You don't have to sit around watching us sign things.
The other order of business is a walk-in as well. It would be item 8F, and that is a letter that Ms. Delamella received regarding a donation, potential donation of $5,000 to the preschool.
So I'll go ahead and read the letter.
Oh, 3?
Yeah, 3.
Sorry.
Dear Jackson School Board, we are prepared to donate $3,000 to the preschool at Jackson, New Hampshire for the express purpose of purchasing playground and other needed equipment. Here are the parameters of the donation. 1, our foundation requires that the organization has a 501c3 status. 2, that the playground be open to all children in the village when the preschool is not in session, unless insurance objects. 3, that the donation is for the equipment and not for operating expenses. I think I'd just like to, on behalf of the school board, thank April Spouse for the letter. It's a wonderful gesture, and I think, until there's something more solid in terms of preschool plans, we just have to put that on hold for now, and when we get to that point.
Can I just ask, has it been looked at that the playground over there is okay for preschool?
It does need to be upgraded
Okay.
for safety purposes
Okay.
for preschool students to use. Some of the equipment's for older students
Yeah.
and needs some repair. The fence needs some work. There's some
Yeah,
things
okay.
that need to be done to make it safe, yeah.
And regardless of whether we accept this or use this or not, I do want to recognize, I think it was Micah who, this came unsolicited. I mean, that we have a group of people who, as you guys could see from tonight's meeting, are very active and really would like this and are very pro-education. So I would like to recognize that it's nice to live in a community where we have people who are just going to step up unsolicited and offer us help. Whether we can use it or not, we'll see. But that was a very nice gesture, I thought, and a meaningful one.
Yeah, very generous.
No, we can't like conditionally accept it or anything like that. It wouldn't be worth doing that.
I don't think it's
We just gotta
necessary.
be silly 3 months later to go back and say, hey, remember that money you said you would give us?
Well, next month,
Are you still offering that?
So maybe you can use this as part of whatever you bring
Right,
to
part of the
September.
presentation in September would
Yeah.
be, that would offset $3,000 worth of startup costs.
Right, if we can
purchases.
accept the conditions. Or that's how that works, right, Kevin?
Yes, correct.
Moving on to administrator reports. How much, Kevin?
Well, we're going to give a combined piece here. You wanna-
Why don't you pass those down?
Sure.
As you know, back in the spring and June, we talked a little bit about moving forward as a school district with competency-based education. And over the summer, various faculty members have been involved in readings, and the administrative team has been meeting every Wednesday and meeting with Fred Belmonte, who is a local New Hampshire,
Yes,
I don't know what to call him, administrator, I guess, that has worked with the State Department in developing competencies and the movement towards competency-based education across the state. So we've given you a few things. I think you may have seen this before. This was the visual that kind of describes what we're talking about when we're talking about competency-based education. And we've revised it a little bit over the summer as we've learned more and had more conversations about what that would look like in our district and then in each of our schools. Work habits separated out, which we've done here at the elementary level. The anytime, any place, any pace learning, which is something that's a work in progress. More personalized learning at the high school level, varied ways for students to earn credit. So there were a lot of really child-centered ideas contained within this movement. In July, all of the administrators from the district, as well as teachers from many of the schools across the district, spent 3 days at the Design Studio, which was presented by a group of educators who have been doing this for 5 years or so from other school districts. And it was a really, really useful conference where they presented kind of all different topics related to it, whether it was the professional development piece, the community development piece, what teachers actually did in the classroom, how they used technology, and we all split up and took all different sessions. And then one of the strongest pieces for me, anyway, was that we had an opportunity to have 90 minutes as a team every day to bring all of that to the table and work with Kevin and Katie in terms of where do we want to go as a district with this movement. So we've all together done a lot of learning and had a lot of discussion. At the same time, for those of you in the audience, the board knows that we had a board retreat and a staff retreat where we looked at some of our goals. And as I was working through the summer, we looked at a lot of ways that the ideas that we brought forward as things we wanted to work on as a building would dovetail really nicely with this, the pacing, the personalized learning piece, the extended learning opportunities, having mentorships out in the community. So we've done a whole lot of conversation and thinking about what that could look like for us. This document here, we've worked on as an admin team primarily. It's kind of our timeline and where we hope to get to by the end of phase 6. Our school building is somewhere between phase 3 and 4, depending on which of those items that you're looking at. We do have some work to do. The second conference we went to in August, 3 of the staff members, myself, and some of the other administrators from the Pine Tree School, teachers and the administrator from the Pine Tree School, and Katie, went to a state conference on the PACE work, more specific to the assessment piece. How do you design a quality performance-based assessment? How do you use a rubric to evaluate student work? We had some hands-on experience with samples from schools all around the state and some guidance from those who are at the State Department in terms of how do you develop and design good quality assessments to monitor student learning as the kids go through. So that was really useful as well. And so you can see kind of where we're intending to go with that. And then there's a sheet here, which is just some bullet points on the things that we've been learning about competency-based, the difference between mastery and competencies and standards, students having voice, and just more descriptors of the things that you see on the poster. I think for the most part, our faculty is super excited about getting into the work and making some changes to their current practice. We will be continuing to, we're going to be reading a book moving into the year as a staff about leaders of their own learning, and trying some student-led conferences over the course of the year, particularly with our older kiddos. So we're really excited about some of the direction that we're going in.
So if I can dovetail this, very exciting. And, you know, the work started 2014-15 with the strategic planning process and the we believe statements and the core values and visioning. In the work that you folks did last spring, this fits so nicely in these components. And one of the pieces about this is to ensure that all students have access to all components of this from a systemic standpoint. We know that there are pockets of brilliance in each classroom, but we want to make sure that all of the students have the ability to access and have this as part of their educational program. We also recognize that schools within the district are at different places, and education has really changed, and it will continue to change. And we want to be at the forefront. And I think that we have some dynamite administrators and staff who are taking this on, and New Hampshire leads the nation in a lot of this work here. The hard work is going to be the assessments. So we recognize that standardized assessments are valuable, but also the assessments that are tailored to the local control is very important. Now, that's not to say that the PACE assessments will not be valid, reliable. I mean, they will be. And there's quite a process that these teachers are going to have to take on so that when they do their assessments, that they're scored, they're checked, they're scientifically evaluated for the reliability. But also, one of the key pieces is really that depth of learning, and that's where those competencies come in. It's not necessarily more and more or faster and faster. It's really getting to that level 4, they call it depth of knowledge. Level 1 would be kind of those rote memorization pieces. 2 is more the comprehension. 3, you're starting to get into some analyzing and evaluating. And then level 4 is really that transference of those big ideas and that application over and over again. There are a few examples of the difference between standards and competencies on here. We'll take feedback as well. If you find things that might make it clear, please do email related to these, but we've been developing these talking points. We also recognize that schools are at different places, and you'll see that a lot of the work that we've done are phase 1 and phase 2, and we are not experimenting. We aren't saying that this is just the newest, greatest thing, but it's very hard to argue against a lot of these components. With that, you'll get an invitation from me tomorrow. Fred Bramante, as Gail said, was a member of the State Board of Education, and he wrote a book called Off the Clock. And he was on the state board where they said, you know what, we aren't giving credits just for seat time anymore. Students should be able to earn credits in numerous different ways. And really, if a student is ready to move on, we should be able to do that. And I think probably the most simple example is much like we do with the ESSC. We don't say because you're in grade 3, you're what? You know, or okay, you're in 6th grade, so you're automatically in, what's the highest? Purple, right? It doesn't work that way, and it's really that ready document to move on, and that's exciting. But it's also, Jackson is, I think, the perfect place to move some of these pieces forward. And it's a lot of the conversation that we had before. How do we extend those opportunities for students, their student voice and choice? How do we instill that passion and support their passion and interest areas as well? So, as far as the goals go, I know that we framed out some goals. I think it's fair for Gail and the staff to go back through those, because we've had some information this summer, and then really take a look at key indicators for the school to be able to say, okay, student-led conferences, we know we want to do that. We're going to do that once a year, twice a year? We're going to do it with just 5th grade, 6th grade? What does that look like? So we'll be coming back to you in September with those.
I think this is all very exciting. One of the things that you added, the work session that we had with the staff, certainly I left that meeting anyway with a lot of confidence that this staff really has tremendous abilities to facilitate all of these things, and they're already doing a lot of these things. And yes, I'd like to say, like, don't let what the SAU 9 doing constrain what happens here, but they don't anyway. They're
ahead.
They're in a great way. The one piece that I find frustration with, and this isn't towards administrators, this is with the law, is the standardized assessments. And what makes me so excited about this is that one of the goals of this is to limit the number of standardized assessments. And to me, it's like bashing your head against the wall. But the standardized assessments that we have in place now derive from a period from 10 years ago, a push 10 years ago, and we're still stuck in it. And why? Everyone you talk to wants less. We do 3 weeks of standardized testing in the school every year. Why? If it's not beneficial to the student, to the teachers, to the assessment process, and I understand it's going to take a little bit of patience on school board's parts and parents' parts and administrators' parts, that we have the law in place that we have, so we are stuck with what we've got. But if anyone wants to, as a school board, advocate for changing the law, we do have the ability to do that through the School Board Association and say, hey, it's time that, this PACE program allows you to petition the state school board so that you can limit the number of assessments you do. But we have kids that are going to be in school next year taking 3 weeks of standardized testing. And just want to point it out there that it frustrates the heck out of me. I wish we could do something different. And that's not to you at all. I understand you're bound to say everybody else is, but just putting that out there, I guess, Scott, you wanted to comment?
May I?
Yeah.
The easiest way to do that is not being on the New Hampshire School Board Association, and they won't have a say anymore. And, so this is a great job, apply for more awards for Eddies and the state, New Hampshire School Award, or whatever you can do, and that focuses on what you're doing great.
Right.
Even though it's bad, go for it.
Just a couple of points, Jerry. We're right with you as far as the standardized assessment. But what we do want is to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And you have to have benchmarks, and that's the process that they're going through. So the assessments that they will be giving will be tied to the competencies and the standards, but they'll be tailored, but they'll be very reliable. And that's a
And I guess that's
key
the point I was
piece.
making about patience on my part
Yeah.
anyway, is having faith that that's occurring. It's good to see that it is. That's why I'm excited about it.
In Jackson, and there's another district, school in the district, that is, it starts at Tier 3, which is really where most of our schools are getting started. And then Tier 2 is they're jumping in. And then Tier 1 is your assessments are validated and they're ready to go. And what they're doing is there will be a series of assessment, and probably somewhere around 10 to 12 per content area over the course of the year. Some will be formative or quick, and some will be more summative, some will be performance-based, and then there's also where the teacher can use their judgment to weigh in as well. And then all of those paint a real nice picture of who the student is. You really have to know your students. And that's exciting, but it's also empowering for staff. And then really the goal is that when you're ready for these assessments, you can take these assessments. If you aren't ready for the assessment, we aren't going to do it because it's,
Time.
April 12th, and the book says you should be here at April 12th. That does nobody any good. And so that's the exciting part, is it's really tailored toward the students. So Fred Bramante, I don't think I gave you the date, but a week from today at 1 o'clock, and I'll send out an invitation. At the Professional Development Center in Conway. All the boards will be invited, just to have a roundtable discussion with him. He's got an interesting story. Anybody who went to Daddy's Junkie Music as a kid and played guitar, and he owned a lot of those stores. But he's a mover and a shaker.
Is that the only time he'll be with you this fall?
No, he'll be with us other times as well.
Because I know I can't make that one, but I would love to see him. I read the book.
Sunday night, if you're interested, he'll be up early, and
Okay.
we're gonna go out for a cup of coffee someplace. I'll send you an email.
Okay, yeah, and I will say, I would love to second what Jerry's saying, which is that I think assessments have a very valid place in education, and it is very encouraging to think that we are moving towards meaningful use of assessments and ongoing. So I'll just say,
Assessment of, for, and while learning.
yeah.
That's-
Are we using, when you're talking about how these assessments are going to go, are you going to be using software that is available at the state level to every school, or is it going to be created by us? Is it a combo, or are we not sure
It's a
yet?
combination. The competencies and the big common assessments, there are common assessments, and then there are school and local assessments. So we'll be using local assessments to assess our curriculum and our day-to-day instruction as we go along. And as Kevin said, when a student's ready to take the culminating assessment for multiplications day, that student will take that and then move into the next unit. However, the state is still going to ask us to submit common assessments that are given to all of the students. And that's part of what we worked on when we were at that conference, was we were reading student writing and student explanations of how they figured out math problems. And there were some cool ones about if you're on a desert island, set up a government. It was the high school. I got on a 7th grade team. It was a little... some really high-level stuff, setting up an aristocracy, a democracy, or, would you go with socialism or democracy and why, and that kind of thing. And so there were kids really trying to persuade how they would set that up. So it's an in-depth understanding. It's not just knowing what they are, but being able to say, this is the kind of government that I would choose, and this is why I would choose it, and being able to defend that, and then also include capitals and periods and paragraphing and all of those. So it was authentic work that the kids had done. It wasn't just a multiple choice clicking A, B, C, or D. It was much more authentic.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Okay, moving on to citizen comments. Anything from the gallery?
I have a TikTok question on the preschool. Assuming that you pass the hurdle of where costs and curriculum so that you can make a presentation, prior to the public hearing, will the board vote whether or not to offer preschool to the voters in March?
I would not now, I can go before.
Yeah, I would think after the public hearing.
Yeah, that's usually what we could base a better decision on, is, and the reason why we'd had the public hearing is so that we could inform ourselves to better make that decision. And so the way I see it happening anyway, I will always advocate that when we go to put the preschool into the budget, that we do so as a separate warrant article. In which case we'd have to have a public hearing for that as well. So I think that time-wise, as far as, we wouldn't be making the decision to put it on a warrant article, we'd be making the decision as that we're going to incorporate it into our budget for...
Prior to the public hearing.
Prior to the public hearing for the warrant. We'll make a decision then as to what the articles we present to that public hearing are going to be. But I think as far as committing to developing that warrant article, we would want to have a public hearing before we decide as a school board, okay, now we're going to actually do this or we're not going to do this. And what we'll be doing is developing a warrant article for the
I guess
meeting.
my question is, would you make a decision on whether or not as a board to offer to the voters a question on preschool based on the vocalness of certain citizens at a public hearing.
So I'll elaborate on that a little bit from my standpoint, not speaking for the rest of the board. For me, it's two things. One, I want the public hearing, because personally, I am for the preschool on a lot of levels, not on all the levels. And I want to make sure I hear that from the public before I even think about recommending to put it on a warrant article.
I guess my only caution with regard to that is very often people who speak at a public hearing are not the total temperature, if you will.
But we
of
see
the
most of
voters.
them every month here. We see the other side every month here. So
Right.
it's not, I'm not personally going to base my decision on only what happens at that meeting. You know, the rest of the year, I see the amounts of people who are for it, the comments that are for it. So let's give the people who are not for it a chance to come out and tell us their side too. It's not meaning, oh, if more than half the people show up at the public hearing, I'm going to vote no. You know, that's not really what I'm saying from how I feel. I just want to hear the other side, because you know that they're going to show up to that meeting. They might not show up to these meetings. So that's the only time I'm going to hear from any of them that might not be for it.
The only real measure is when you count the votes.
Yeah, yeah.
Look, it's helpful to hear from people, but we've spent a lot of time on this already, and at least from my perspective, we're at a point where the devil really is going to be in those details. I think you said it before, I think we're generally in support of preschool.
That was the TikTok I was talking about.
Yeah, and I
It was
mean,
getting to that point,
Right.
where you would make a vote as to whether or not to support it.
Right.
There's a lot of information that you need to have.
Right.
I get that. But what I'm concerned with is that you would change a vote as a board based on what you hear at a public hearing.
no,
I don't think
so.
I don't think any of us are of the mindset that that's going to.
I'm not even sure that we want it yet. I don't like, so it's not, I wouldn't call it changing a vote. I would call it waiting to decide. if you're gonna vote. No, nobody's going to sway my vote, but I need to have all the pieces before I can make that vote. And I feel like the pieces against it are not going to come to these meetings every week when it's on there. They're going to come to that one. So
I think
we at least owe it to them to hear them out.
And I think process-wise, last year, we didn't have all the details in place. So it was kind of hard for us to, because as Andy said earlier in the meeting, we will probably get the support of the town behind it. And it's the process we go through. We owe it to the town to make sure we're giving the public the chance to tell us what they want to tell us. Because once we make the decision to do it, once we vote as a board to have a warrant article for March that has preschool on it, it will likely pass. And we want to be as transparent as possible. So I think that the way I look at it is that we have the public hearing to establish transparency and to establish a sound process. We all will use our best judgment as to how much we weight that public hearing as to our overall decision to go ahead and do it. But I think it's process-wise, it's important to go through the motions to make it a valid process and to make that March vote meaningful.
And it might help us word the warrant article in a way that it would get passed, with the feedback from that meeting. Whether it's the negative comment is maybe somebody's not totally against it, they like it all, but they don't like this, and you hear that from a few people, and it might help us adjust the wording of
I think
actually for the warrant that would pass. If we were behind
I
it.
would make the point that the only true measure is votes.
Yeah.
When you count the votes. And I think that if there's other people who are going to be politically, before they know the details, for or against the
Yeah.
preschool. And they're going to be very vocal on both levels. We saw some of that tonight for. You saw before the people against. But if you have a public hearing and make it as transparent and as well advertised as possible, that maybe then at the school meeting in March, we'll get a number of people that would come instead of just 15
represent.
and be done in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But you'd have an adult conversation about it and be able to present it. But again, I would say that the measure is the town voting. That's the measure of it.
I also look at it as an education process for both sides. You don't want to surprise anybody. There are still people who are, oh, what are we talking about? I mean, there's been a lot of laws that have been put into place since I was in school to having kids in school, and you're like, well, when did this happen? So it's a part of marketing per se, education on both sides to make sure the community is aware of what's going on
Right.
in general, and maybe bringing some people up to speed as to some of the pros for doing this. There's still people out there who don't believe in it, and maybe educating them as to what's going on, so they're not blindsided either. So you have to hit people repetitively over the head sometimes with information. This is coming, we're talking about this, come join us, come learn about it, get on board or not, but at least don't be surprised. Because the last thing you want is that March meeting with 150 people going, what are you talking about?
Right.
You know, that's what we're trying, and, you know, from my perspective, the more we communicate with the general public, the less we'll have that at that meeting. And
Some people are always going to be blindsided.
oh, yeah, they want to be blindsided, they want to come peacock at that meeting, I get it,
But
so.
what I sense from you all is that you want to be as open and as involving many people as possible. That's a good thing. But again, I would hope that you'd understand that the real measure is when the town votes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
For me, I have a hard time, I don't know if the rest of the board knows this about my opinion, I'm not really for it right now. I think public preschool is fantastic, and I think we definitely need to work to it. What I do not want to do is make this happen quick, knee-jerk reaction just to get it going. I'm going to slow everything down as much as I can as one board member.
Well,
Not saying I don't want it to happen, but I
This
need
has
to...
been seriously talked about for what, 3 years now?
Well, it's been seriously talked about, but we also haven't had all the details either.
And you don't-
To be honest, I'm not comfortable with it being in the church, for one. Not necessarily a church, but an outbuilding over there and not, that's the hard part, me as a board member is trying to get past, is being okay with it being over there.
That's why I think that, you know, that's why we need to establish the process of, get as much of the details in place as we can, so we can see that, make an informed decision, have the public hearing for the feedback, and then I think after the public hearing, we have to make a decision and take a majority vote of the board to see whether we're gonna put forward the warrant article for it or not. And that's what our process will look like.
I'll give you a parallel, Keith, in the town. When the town was considering building a town garage, there were like 7 places that people were talking about. And the place that it finally went, there was a strong...
I know, I remember.
Against, and yet now it's there, people are happy with it.
Yeah.
But I think that at this point in the process, it's time for the school board to make a decision on it.
Right.
Either to pursue it or don't. And we'll do that.
I will say, just as we're thinking about this, the one concern I have in the back of my mind is that right now we are waiting for one specific plan to come forward. And if we want to bring preschool to Jackson, we're hinging it all on one plan right now, one location for this next round. So if that, we'll find out hopefully in September, but if that doesn't work out, we have to come to grips with the fact that we are postponing it yet another year if...
Or a couple.
Or more, well, yeah.
And that's not gonna affect my decision, I know that. But I don't really care about timing as...
No, but I understand what you're saying.
I mean, at some point,
So
we're gonna
either
have to
the board
step
is
aside
and we'll figure out a way to do it, or are we waiting for the ultimate, so, you know, the perfect solution
Right.
before we say yes?
And I'm all for
I get it.
taking the time that needs to happen, because I want it to be the right decision. And
Yeah.
ultimately, I will say, in my mind, we made a choice to be elected officials up here to stand up and vote for something or not vote for something. And we can listen to whoever we want to, but our names are at the bottom of that at the end of the day. So we all have to be comfortable with that, and I want it to be a good process.
Yeah.
My biggest concern is that we, right now, we've got that church piece. So if September that doesn't work out, or October we can't make that work, then what? Are we gonna, then we make a decision as a board, we're not moving forward at all? Or are we gonna throw it out and say, okay, we'll look at another plan then for the next year? And I just want to be thoughtful about that. I don't have a right answer. I just.
I think that's something
Yeah.
we'll always continue, I think with this current board, because we all feel strongly that it's a great thing, I think we'll always keep talking about it, even if this one gets voted down. You know, I know that might frustrate some people.
Well, it frustrates
timing.
It frustrates me.
Yeah, right.
It's what I don't quite understand about this, is that, this is what I mean, but it's time for the school board to make a decision on this.
Right.
And we're just about there, and we need to do that.
Right.
What we're talking about is preschool in the church,
Yeah.
and we're not talking about anything else. If we want to start talking about, we want preschool no matter what, that's, you know, that's also a question we can ask and pursue, and we should do that. You know,
Right.
do we have the space in our current facility, or do we need to build a new one?
Right.
Because that's the only solutions to that.
And then to top that question up, I didn't want to go there, make it difficult. Not only do we need to build a new one, but based on Gail's numbers for what it's going to cost us to run a preschool, is there going to be a savings for us if it was in the same building?
Right.
Because then it might be, okay,
Right.
let's go ask for 150 grand and put an addition on.
Right.
You know, there's
No, and those were all.
lots of, that's why I think so hard to make a
You could have an
decision.
all insurrection to take over the fire department.
Another option.
It looks like it needs a little work, right?
Make sure that doesn't get in the record.
I was just making a point, there's lots of things that I am not prepared to make a decision yet, till we have a
And
public
that's
hearing.
fine, and that can be the prerogative, I mean, that'll be the decision the school board makes.
Yeah.
But we, at some point, we need to make a decision for the plan that's on the table, and the plan that's on
Yeah.
the table is a
We don't know
preschool
yet.
in the church,
Yeah.
that we either be presenting for operation in the 18-19 school year or not. And we'll take that step and we'll move on from there.
Yeah.
If that, for some
Yeah, I'm
reason.
not sure if for some reason the church fell through. I'm not sure, we could all go on the record saying we support preschool, the church isn't gonna work, but there'd be nothing to vote on. I mean, I'm supporting what you're saying. If we're voting on preschool in the church, and we could go on the record saying, yeah, we all support preschool, but there's nothing to vote on if it wasn't at the church at this point.
Yeah, I think we need to go through the first
Or-
step,
yeah.
which is what we have on the table, because we could have made the plan 6 months ago to have a plan A, B, and C. Right now, we don't have plans B and C, we've got plan A. And we need to make a decision on plan A, one
Yeah.
way or the other. We've got pretty much all the details we need to know about plan A before us right now. Iron out a couple of them so that we're all more comfortable to make that decision, but if the bottom line is the board's not comfortable making a decision on plan A because we don't have all the details we need, I'm just saying, we're not in favor of plan A. Then we can either decide to make a
Yeah.
plan B and a plan C if we want to, but we're not. We haven't
No,
set
I
the
wouldn't say I'm
process.
not prepared to make a decision, I want to hear the public hearing, then I'm the only.
Well, I guess that's really kind of what I meant about the town too. I'm not making the assumption that the town's gonna say yes, but when we were talking about the funding, it's like they're either gonna vote for it fully funded or not. It's kind of the same thing. It's either like, it's there, we vote yes, we're gonna do it there.
Yeah.
And then the town can vote yes, we're gonna fund it.
Yeah.
And that is two very cut and, they're not cut and dry, but
Yeah.
once we get to that point,
In
that's.
longer term, you could plan to do something other than the church.
Right.
And I'm going to give you an analogy again back to the town garage. Selectmen offered a concept on the town garage. We don't know where it's going to be, we don't know what it's going to look like, we just want you to vote the funds for it. The voters rejected that soundly.
And that's, I think, the point that I'm trying to make with that, is that we can either put forth a plan that the voters can vote on, or we don't. And right now, we're working on a plan that involves preschool at the church, and that's our plan A. And we can either decide to move plan A forward or not. At some point, we have to make that decision, and we should make it sooner rather than later. If we decide to go with plan A, then plan A is what we present. And we do need to make it as black and white and as transparent as possible. And to me, part of that transparency is having a public hearing before we commit to the school board saying, yes, we're going to move forward with plan A. If we don't, then the problem with it is the politics, because if we don't stand either for or against a specific plan, we're not really supporting anything. We can say we're supporting preschool to we're blue in the face, but we're really not until we decide to move forward with, here's our plan for the preschool. If it's always going to be just a fundamental discussion about whether we're going to have it or not, that's just spinning wheels in mud.
It doesn't mean
It
anything.
doesn't mean anything.
Is along Gail, for some reason, you still feel in the next week that you're kind of being left hanging a little bit. I'm more than happy to go talk to the other Gail, just as a school board member, to help. If you're not getting an answer,
Okay.
let me know.
Check in with
And I'll-
you middle of next week, and
and I'll
I'll let you
go.
know if she's responding.
But the reason for the transparency and the reason for making a decision is that, yes, we're holding out for, both sides of that equation and the in-betweens. But we have a significant portion of the community of Jackson coming to the school board and asking us to pursue school board. To pursue preschool. We're obligated to do that, I think. And we've come up with this plan, and it's the best one that we've gotten to date. And I think we need to make a decision on that, so that the people who are advocating for it either can push us to do it more if they want to, or back off. And the people who are against it can do the same. But until we make a decision, we're leaving the people who are for it and against it, and all the people in between in limbo, and forever in limbo until we make a decision on it. So that's why I think it's our prerogative to do so.
Good job.
Right.
And we'll have numbers and we can get a synopsis of the whole plan at the next meeting, is that what you were saying?
That's my goal.
And just one other thing, just this is a personal viewpoint. I think that preschool helps cement education in Jackson. It makes it so that it's a cohesive, town-supported process that guarantees education in Jackson will continue. I think that's important for the growth of the town.
And also, we're getting young people to move into town. It's really, really important. Everybody across the country is figuring out how are we going to get young people to move into towns. Affordable housing, all the rest of that stuff. Taking that totally aside, if you have something, Jackson has wonderful things to offer to people to come into town. I mean, unbelievable things. And one of the basic things is your school system. And if you can offer preschool, kindergarten into your town, people are going to want to come to the town to live here. Young people are going to want to come because you've offered this to them. And you last year, Jessica, had a very good, you had broken it down to, it's only going to cost the taxpayer X amount of dollars per year, which was minimal. So minimal it was ridiculous. But it was to a point that we have the naysayers are going to say, well, that's not very much.
Right.
When you think about it. And so it's really important that you don't delay this. It's really important to bring young people into town with young children. And it's vital for the community. It truly is. But anyway, that's beside the point.
Thanks. Board member issues. Keith and I met with Kevin and Gail right before this meeting. In September, we'll have a job description for the principal position here. Just so you know, at this point, what we're talking about there is a principal, not a teaching principal. What we're going to be presenting to the board to consider for adopting as a job description and personnel changes. So that'll be our first look at that in September for that piece.
Great, thank you.
1983 was the last time it was
Reviewed?
updated.
Wow.
Really, that contract?
That's like
No, the principal
three,
job
four
description.
principal jobs.
On ours?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it didn't, the previous board, when the teaching principal didn't change it then, or was it teaching principal before?
Yeah, so
He
you
was teaching principal before.
But the job description hasn't been updated since 1983, so.
I didn't realize that. That was-
It's not even on the computer.
It was a great year.
I have a question, just to follow up from June. Last year, we ended with the thought that this year we would be looking at listening posts for middle and high school. And last year, it was more of an academic endeavor and a responsibility feeling on my part as a board member. But I now have a rising sixth grader, so there's more urgency to my interest in it. And I'm wondering, is that something that the school board is going to make a priority this year? Or I'm happy to do it on my own, but I do feel like we said we were going to do something like that, and I just want to know how we're planning to handle that.
Repeat the first part, an advocate or?
Listening.
Listening posts. So last year, we had, actually, I never thought about the high school until you raised it. And then I realized that that was something that I personally would like to learn more about.
I think November, December is a great time for that.
December.
Not before November, December.
Well, especially given all these other things we have.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to know as we're planning the year, because it seems to, it just goes.
Right.
Is that something we want to,
Listening posts for high school?
we were gonna do separate with middle school and then
Well, I think we
high
should
school.
combine that meeting, because otherwise you're gonna get one at one meeting and one at the other meeting.
Yeah, I don't care how we do it, I just was curious, because I don't know a lot about
Can I sit on that one for the high school?
Yeah.
Well, that's, so. Me too. So I guess my question, or my board member issue is, are we going to do that? And if so, can we put that in the calendar to do?
It's a great idea.
I think it is too, because Andy and I have high school kids so far, and you're thrown to the wolves over there. You're relying on your child to do, which they should learn to do, don't get me wrong, but you're hoping you got the right child that's gonna succeed over there.
Right.
You know
So
what I
what
mean?
if we have it like before the October meeting? Just put it in there, we have 5 o'clock or whatever.
So is there a possibility that there's going to be a public hearing before the October meeting?
Yeah.
I'm thinking like,
I'm not
when I say not
rushing.
before November, December, maybe January, February is a better time to do that.
And anyway, let's put it under old business.
Yeah.
Board members, put it under old business.
And we'll get a date set at the next meeting for that.
Great.
That we will have a little better idea on when the public hearing might be for the preschool and the listening post for that, so. Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. It's one I've let so far, so.
Do we have a non-public?
Anything else? Board member issues? Next meeting, September 18th, 6 PM, here on Monday. And Now we can start signing away, I suppose.
You have more to say?
Oh, no, if Plan A doesn't work out with the church,